Legendary commander sculptures are hard to come by in Rise of Kingdoms. You know it, I know it, everybody knows it. Everyone wishes they had just a few more legendary commander sculptures. So today we're going to go over the top 10 best budget build commanders in Rise of Kingdoms that are as effective as possible at 5511. Now if you guys don't know what 5511 means, it simply means the skill levels of the commander from left to right. So the first skill at 5, the second skill at 5, the third skill at 1, and the fourth skill at 1. Now before we begin, of course, as you guys know, I am a partnered creator with Rise of Kingdoms, which means they support a few videos on the channel every single month, just like this one. But the most important support comes from you guys dropping a thumbs up down below and consider subscribing. And of course, what's going on, guys? Cheers. People always ask me what's in this mug. They think it's beer, and you're right. No, I'm kidding. You're not right. It's just water. There's just a little bit of water in here for now. Maybe it's vodka. No, it's not vodka. No, it's Anyway, now I want to be very clear here. The last time I made a video talking about the best 5511 commanders in Rise of Kingdoms was in February of 2024. So it has been over a year since I've made a video like this, and there is a good reason for that. And that is because I am a firm believer that using a commander at 5511 is something that was way more viable back during the earlier stages and earlier days of the game. These days, very few people are running around the open field without expertise legendary commanders in the end game. In kvk 1 and 2, that's a different story, but in end game, you really want to have only the best of the best on the battlefield. So I'm going to start this video with a disclaimer, which I'm sure somebody has already commented it down below. You shouldn't be using commanders that aren't expertise. Okay, it really is going to fill your hospital quite quickly, and it's just suboptimal. You're just running around with a suboptimal march, and that can get really expensive. But the reason that I'm making this video is because, as I stated at the very start of the video, legendary commander sculptures are hard to come by, and you might be partially invested in a commander and wondering, can I use this commander even if it is suboptimal? Is it something that I can even try? Is it possible? Can I still use them? And the answer is yes, you can still use 5511 commanders. Just be very careful, be warned. You have to play super safe, you have to know what you're getting yourself into, and really, if you can avoid using a 5511 commander, you probably should. With that being said, however, there are some commanders in Rise of Kingdoms that perform better at 5511 than others, and so if you are going to make this risky play on the battlefield, then the commanders we talk about in this video should be the ones that you consider. Now this video is not in any real particular order, but I will say that the commanders that we talk about later in the video are definitely stronger than the ones that we talk about here in the beginning. And in fact, the first two commanders out of the 10 are really sort of almost honorable mentions, and that's primarily because they're sort of exceptions. So let me go ahead and explain. And in order to do that, we will start with my first honorable mention, and that is none other than Mehmed. Mehmed is the first commander that we're going to talk about here at 5511. And why is he an honorable mention? Well, it's because this is not a commander that you're ever going to put sculptures into willingly, right? Unless maybe you're in kvk 1 and you're going to swap him later. He's a commander you're going to get for free from the gold keys, and I do think that if you used him at 5511 as a universal secondary commander with his museum relic, you'll get an okay result out of him. Now his damage factor is still quite low if he's not expertise, and even if he is expertise, let's be honest, it's kind of low, right? It's 1150 to 5 targets. The fan shape is a little bit more narrow than some of the other commanders in the game, and he's also going to get 20% attack, 20% skill damage. The third skill doesn't matter, and the fourth skill will give you 2% unit capacity. Plus, if we take a look at the museum here, he's also going to get his hands on 30% health, 10% more skill damage, and I suspect we're going to see a third tier upgrade for his relic probably by the end of the year. I would hope. If it's not by the end of 2025, I'd be shocked. So maybe by the time you're watching this video, Mehmed is even stronger at 5511. But really, if you think about 190 legendary commander sculptures, you get 30% health, 20% attack, 30% skill damage, and a 5 target AoE, and all those stats are universal. You could put him anywhere you want. Yes, he's slow, yes, his damage factor is low, but the unique part about Mehmed is you're going to get him at 5511 eventually for free anyway. It's going to happen at some point. And the reason that he makes this list is because, as I said before, his third skill literally doesn't do anything in the open field, so you're not missing much there. The fourth skill, you're losing out on 8% unit capacity, okay, and the damage factor, you're losing out on 200 per target, which is, it's not nothing, but it's a very small amount, right? And in this past kvk, sorry, not this past kvk, but the kvk before that, I did use Mehmed behind my Huo for a little bit, and it was fine. It wasn't crazy, it wasn't game breaking, right? It wasn't like my best March, but it was okay, and we had pretty strong enemies. So sure, I used him at expertise, right? So what, I had 200 more damage factor and 8% more units, but like even at 5511 he would be okay on the battlefield. Just again, be very safe, very cautious. And the second runner up that I want to talk about here is actually Joan of Arc Prime, and this is because she is technically not a 5511 commander. However, with 190 legendary commander sculptures, you can get a lot of the value out of her still. The first skill obviously is her most valuable skill. It's a 3-target AoE, which has aged a little bit at this point. I mean, we have commanders with higher damage factor and more targets, right? We have other commanders that have the same amount of damage factor with a debuff and more targets. So okay, so our active skill's a little bit power crept at this point, but it's aged pretty well. And it also says for the next 3 seconds, up to 3 nearby allied or friendly troops, including this commander troop, deal 5% more damage and gain 20 rage per second. That's for 3 seconds, so that's a total of 60 rage. And then we're gonna try to skip the second and third skills. Now this is quite literally the hardest configuration to get from an RNG perspective. Like getting a 5115 commander is the chances of that are very low, right? It's very low. You have to win a 1 in 3 chance 4 times in a row, right? So it's very rare to get this, but if you can, then you're gonna get 10% cav health and a 100% chance to cast your active skill twice every other skill cycle, and along the way you're still going to get 5% cav attack, 2% march speed, 2% outside of territory, and a 1% bonus to normal damage. The third skill is not really good no matter what it's at, but you'll get 1% bonus cav damage and 10% normal damage bonus after using an active skill for 1 second. So you're missing out on some cav attack and march speed for sure, right? For sure. But even still, most of our value comes from just this active skill, casting it twice and getting the health, right? And if you get lucky enough to get a 5115 Joan, should you stop there? No, I would say you should run her at 5515 if you want to run her as a budget build. You definitely don't need the expertise these days. You've never really needed it, to be honest. It's not that relevant, but again, this is why she is technically an honorable mention on the list. You want more skill points in the second skill. It's hard to get the 5115, but if you do get lucky enough to get that and you've got no more sculptures to spend, you could try running a Joan of Arc as secondary with only 2 of the skills maxed. The next commander we're going to talk about here is Margaret. Margaret is one of the first engineering commanders in Rise of Kingdoms history, and at 5511 you actually get a lot of the value out of her if you're running a ranged march. Why is that? Well, her active skill says for the next 3 seconds you deal 50% more ranged normal damage, and whenever their troop launches a basic attack, it deals an extra ranged direct damage of up to 600, reduced by 50% if not within melee range. The second skill gives you a bunch of stats. You get 20% attack, you get 20% march speed, and whenever you launch a ranged basic attack, you have a 10% chance to gain another 20% bonus to range normal damage dealt for 3 seconds with a 5-second cooldown. The third skill at 1 gives you a 5% bonus to range skill damage, which, a little hint here, you're not going to use her for skill damage. You have a chance to reduce the enemy's march speed. We don't really care that much about that. And then the fourth skill, you get 1% more all damage, and when you launch a ranged basic attack, you have a 10% chance to reduce the target's defense by 20% for 3 seconds. So you're actually getting half the value out of the defense reduction here just by unlocking this skill. And yeah, your damage is, you know, it's 1 instead of 5, but I mean, that's even at 5 is a small bonus, right? So all in all, at 5511, Margaret is a great primary commander to use as a ranged commander in Rise of Kingdoms, primarily with Cordoba behind her. Why is that? Well, Cordoba is dealing ranged smite damage, and if you run him behind Margaret, her active skill is going to cause that ranged smite damage to deal 50% more ranged normal damage, right? So the timing there is incredible, and you have a chance to gain more ranged normal damage as well. And so you are just going to be popping off with and this is AoE, right? This is an AoE damage, which is insane, right? So this combination is actually quite a great budget build here with Margaret at just 5511. The next commander we're going to talk about here is almost in the same ballpark as Joan of Arc Prime, in my opinion, and that is Herman Prime. Now, Herman Prime is actually really good at 5551, but at 5511 he still is solid. Why is that? The active skill, 2000 damage factor to 3 targets, just like Joan of Arc Prime. Also, you inflict poison stacks to these targets for 10 seconds. You can stack up to 15 times and they take more skill damage. Now, it's true that this poison debuff is less effective now than it was back in the day, right? Back in the day, all commanders basically dealt skill damage, and so this was great. Now it's not as good because we have smite damage and combo damage, but it looks like we're still going to see, I mean, for the time being, we're still going to see a lot of skill damage from infantry because a lot of people are still going to run the Ragnar CPO, and we're still going to see a decent amount of skill damage out of cavalry because either you're running the Huo Arthur, or your second choice, your second cavalry army, has a good chance of having Joan in it, whether it's Nevsky Joan or Huo Joan, right? And for archers, I mean, they might have just ditched true damage altogether based on that face-to-face with the developers. Now we don't have confirmation of that, so that's not 100% certain, but we do know that more skill damage formations are coming in the future, and it seems like archers are going to stay focused on skill damage. So I still think, even though poison isn't as good as it used to be, I don't think it's necessarily going to go anywhere, because I don't think skill damage is necessarily going to go anywhere. It's not going to be as common, but it's still going to be somewhat useful. The second skill gives you 40% of stats and 15% march speed, 20% attack, 20% defense, and that march speed is really good for archers because they really need it. The third skill, with only 1 point, still gives you 5% bonus AoE skill damage, which I really wish you could get the full 20, but you only get 5, and you still at least get the defense reduction here, right? Whenever you use an active skill while attacking another troop on the map, they lose 5% defense for 2 seconds. It ain't much, right? It ain't much, but it's still there. It's still nice. And then the fourth skill being at 1, honestly, it's not that big of a deal because you're taking less damage from poison targets. Okay, fine. But whenever you launch a base attack, you have a 10% chance to deal an extra damage with a damage factor of 50. We don't really care about the damage factor here. It's nice that it's up to 200, but at 1, it's only 50. However, you're still dealing the poison stacks, right? So you're still actually getting a lot of the value out of the skill even at 1, because the main thing that you really like from the skill is the poison stacks, right? So at 5511, is it optimal? No. Is it great? It's fine, right? And that's why he's kind of near the back of this list. He's okay, right? He gets like, really, it's a strong AoE, a solid debuff, and a decent amount of stats and march speed, which are all of the things that archers really like. Everything else on the third and fourth skill is really just all a bonus, right? It's the sprinkles on the top there. And if you had more sculptures, I would want at least this third skill at 5, but at 5511, if that's all that you've got for him, then maybe you could try to make it work. The next commander we're going to talk about is one that we've already briefly mentioned, and that is none other than our boy Cordoba. Where is he? We talked about him for a moment there. Cordoba at 5511 can definitely pop off. Why is that? Active skill, 2400 range smite damage to 3 targets. As I mentioned with Margaret, this is it's a crazy strong damage factor, let's be real, especially at range. Of course, at ranged it's cut in half, right? Reduced by 50% if this commander's troop is not within melee range. So if you are at range, is actually going to be 1200 damage factor to 3 targets, but you have the safety of being a ranged unit. And the second skill being at 5, it's going to give you 20% attack, which you like as a ranged unit, right? Because you're mainly taking ranged counterattacks, right? You're going to get 15% march speed, which you definitely want to get to the battlefield or to get away from somebody coming at you. And you also, when in ranged mode, deal 10% more smite damage, right? So you actually get a lot of value out of this one skill being at 5. The third skill being at 1 gives you 2% defense. Okay, it's not much, but even at 5, it's not much to begin with, right? 10% tops. And then you get the vigilant stacks here, and it will disarm the target for 1 second and deal 50 damage. Really what you like is the disarm here, like the damage factors, whatever, similar to the AoE on Herman, right? Really what you like is the poison stacks here. You really like the disarm. And then the fourth skill at 1, you're still going to take 5% less range counterattack damage, and whenever the troop is hit with a basic attack, it has a 10% chance to gain a 20% bonus to ranged normal damage dealt for 3 seconds. Well, we don't care about this that much, right? Because if you're being hit by a basic attack, and if you're a ranged player, you can let me know if this is right in the comments, but if you're being hit with a basic attack, then you're either in the middle of dismantling or you're running away, right? And so a chance to gain a bonus to range normal damage, well, you're probably not dealing range normal damage if you're actively being hit, right? And if you are still dealing range normal damage, it ain't gonna be for long because you're getting swarmed down, brother. So this bonus, it's a chance, and I don't feel like it would be that impactful, right? And so a lot of the value from Cordoba is in the first 2 skills. Now I like his expertise, right? 15% range normal damage, that's great for his active skill. 20% more range smite damage is also very good, right? So I'm not going to tell you that 5511 Cordoba is like you're done, right? You're not done. If you can expertise them, amazing, right? There's still a lot of value here, but at 5511, if you just want to dip your toe into ranged combat, then for 190 sculptures, you're gonna really struggle to find better value than Cordoba, right? Margaret Cordoba, I feel like it's tried and true. This has been around since Cordoba came out. People have been running 5511 Margaret with a Cordoba behind her. Maybe it's showing its age a little bit, but I still think it's totally fine. The next commander we're going to talk about here is probably another controversial one. This is Shajar. Now I've gone on record, and even in my tier list video I've said that Shajar is actually not very good, and that's because it seems like her true damage gimmick didn't go over very well. People don't love mighty healing, okay, and they just didn't love the true damage aspect. But if we consider her as a primary commander with skill damage at 5511, it's actually not bad, because you gain a 2800 nuke to a single target, and the second skill at 5 gives you 35% health and 20% march speed. That is like an insane amount of stats for archers that they really need. Every archer on the battlefield can benefit from 35% health and 20% march speed, no matter who you slap this on, right? The third skill being at 1 is still going to give you a 5% normal damage taken reduction, so you're getting half the value of this skill just by unlocking it. No extra sculptures required, and whenever you use an active skill, you mighty heal up to 3 nearby allies. Well, they're still going to get 50% of that value as well, and honestly, some of your allies might not want to be mighty healed, right? They might not want to, you know, potentially fill their hospital faster if you're in a position that is not to your advantage, right? The fourth skill, you still take 10% less damage while on the map, and great news, that's 50% of the value that you get just by unlocking this. And when you're on the map, whenever you're reduced to 60% units remaining, you're mighty healed for 2500, right? And you take 20% less damage for the next 8 seconds. The 40% attack is just flat, that's always, right? So you actually get half the value of this skill just by unlocking it across the board. And honestly, the second half of this skill, you're not really going to even get that often. You might really get this a lot in Canyon, but in the open field, like by the time you get to 50%, you probably should be retreating unless it's like Kingsland or something like that, right? So all in all, a lot of her value as a skill damage commander comes from the first 2 skills. She just hits really hard, gives you a ton of health and march speed, and then you get a nice few bonuses here as well, a couple of tanky bonuses. You take 10% less damage, 5% less normal damage. All in all, I think this is a really solid package for a 5511 commander. Next up is CPO Prime, and this is a commander that is similar to Herman Prime, and in that way I guess it's similar to Joan Prime. All the Prime commanders seem to be solid at 5511, but I really wish that, like, if you're going to use CPO Prime, you at least want them at 5551, right? But let's take a look at what we get at 5511, right? You get a 2000 damage factor, 3 target AoE, and the targets lose 30% health for 3 seconds. Historically, this skill has been quite good, right? The damage factor, it has held up okay over the years, and the debuff has, I mean, we still haven't seen a health debuff this strong to this many targets all at once, right? The second skill being at 5 gives you 40% attack, 15% march speed, and outside of territory, you also get another 10% march speed. So you gain a bunch of attack and march speed for infantry. Okay, I wish it was maybe tanky stats, but the march speed is nice. The third skill being at 1 still gives you 10% health, which, great news, you still get the same amount of health as William Wallace. Isn't that hilarious, right? Everyone loves William Wallace. I don't know what's going on, but anyway, even by just having this skill at 1, you have the same amount of health as William Wallace but more attack. Isn't that funny? Yeah, William Wallace is so good. Anyway, this skill at 1 gives you 10% health and a 10% chance to deal 250 damage factor to the target every second for 3 seconds. So again, 50% value out of this skill is nice. Fourth skill at 1, if this commander's troop is on the map, whenever you take skill damage, you have a 50% chance to reduce the damage by 10% and grant a shield to 3 allies with a factor of 250. So not that crazy, right? Not that crazy. I mean, right now you're gonna be taking a lot of smite damage, you're gonna be taking a lot of combo damage, right? Especially as the year goes on. The shielding factor has always been kind of small, and the cooldown is really long here. It's 8 seconds. So like there's a lot of times where even when this is at 5, it's still not doing anything because it's on cooldown, right? So this skill being at 1 is not that huge of a deal, right? Yes, if he's expertise, he's better, obviously. And of course, as I said before, this third skill, I do think that him being at 5551 is better because you get all the health here, right? And you get the maximum amount of value out of that damage over time. But at 5511, again, you're getting a solid AoE, you're getting a high amount of attack stats, you're getting a bunch of march speed for infantry, and you're getting them a little bit of health, which they really like. So all in all, not that much to complain about here. Not to be redundant, but we're gonna go back to back with infantry here. The next one we're gonna talk about is Ragnar Prime, right? Let's take a look. His active skill when it's at 5, unexpertised, is again a 3 target fan-shaped AoE of 2000, right? And the current target, so just the one target, will take additional damage every second for the next 2 seconds, so that's an extra 600 damage factor, right? So it's basically the same thing as the 5511 CPO Prime, except instead of the debuff, you're just dealing 600 extra damage factor to one target. I'd rather have the debuff on CPO, to be honest with you. My opinion only kind of flips when you take into account the expertise, right? The expertise is busted here on Ragnar. It's really strong, but even just at 5, it's still solid. The second gives you 40% infantry defense, 10% march speed, and if you're only containing infantry units, you take 10% less normal damage. So this is extremely tanky, you guys. This is almost as good as Shajar's second skill at 5. Obviously her health is better, right? It's just better. She has more march speed, right? I mean, obviously, but taking 10% less normal damage is nice when you have, I mean, obviously normal attacks, basic attacks, but also all the smite damage going around right now. That's pretty good. The third skill at 1, you'll have a 10% chance to drain the enemy's attack by 10% and their march speed by 10% for 2 seconds. So unfortunately, you're only getting a third of the value out of the skill, but it's still something, right? It's still nice. And honestly, you're probably going to be pairing him with your CPO prime anyway, who's going to already be giving you a decent amount of attack and march speed. And the fourth skill at 5 says if you're in a field troop, you take 10% less skill damage, and every time you reach 70%, you gain a 5% bonus to skill damage for 4 seconds. So again, I wish this, like, you should run, if you're going to run him, you want him expertise, obviously, right? Like I'm going to keep saying that because I already know someone's going to comment down below, at expertise they're better. Like, buddy, of course you spent more sculpture. Like, what the they have higher stats. The point isn't that they're as good at 5511. They're obviously inferior, right? But even with this only being at 1, you're getting a little bit of a bonus here. In hindsight, maybe Ragnar should be a little bit lower on this list. I think that the defense is a little redundant for infantry. Like, they've got a decent amount of defense on their equipment already. The damage factor without the expertise is just average, right? So maybe he does belong to be a little bit lower on the list here, but I still wanted to mention it at least because I do think that he is a potential contender for 5511, even though that's not his optimal state. Next up is King Arthur, ladies and gentlemen. This was a no-brainer. You knew he was going to be on the list because his active skill, whether he's combo or skill damage, deals 2,800 damage factor to 3 targets. It's kind of insane. It's kind of insane. His active skill is one of the strongest active skills in the entire game. The second skill gives you 20% march speed, and if you're attacking a field troop, you gain 50% of stats, 30% attack, and 20% health. So I mean, right there, the crazy active skill and a ton of stats and march speed, like that is tremendous value at 5511. The third skill, however, says you're going to gain either 5% combo attack damage or 5% skill damage, but if you're attacking a field troop, it's multiplied by 3, so it's 15%, which means you actually get half the value of this skill just by unlocking it, right? That's really good. At max, it's 30% skill damage, but at 1, it's 15% skill damage. Not bad just for unlocking it. And the fourth skill says if you're attacking a field troop, whenever you launch a combo attack or deal direct damage, you have a 30% chance to reduce the target's rage by 50 every second for the next 2 seconds. And when you use an active skill, you gain 10% march speed for 3 seconds. Well, if I'm being honest, you don't really need march speed when you're casting your active skill, right? Especially because you're cavalry, you've already got march speed, you're already fast, you're probably paired with someone who has march speed, right? Like this march speed bonus is not that important, and you're still getting, again, 50% of the value of that rage reduction just by unlocking this skill. King Arthur is easily one of the best 5511 commanders in the entire game. Now, his expertise is quite good, and so I would recommend unlocking it. And again, if you can get him to 5551 at least, that is even better, because then you're getting the maximum amount of bonus damage here, and that's really going to help you hit like a truck. But at 5511, like, it's not optimal, but it's like some of the best value you can get out of a 5511 commander for sure. And the final commander we're going to talk about in this video is actually one that has been buzzing through the community a lot, and I guess I should say that this is technically Speculative because he's not in the game at the time of recording this video. But in the same vein as we see with King Arthur, Bai Chi has a lot of the same perks on his first 2 skills. I said this the moment Bai Chi dropped, the same in the reveal video. Okay, I was one of the first, if not the first, English speaking content creator to make a video about Bai Chi's release. Okay, and in that video I said his first 2 skills, as soon as I read them, I was like, he's going to be meta, right? And we're still waiting for him to be in the game, so we don't know if that's the case, but let's just use a little bit of logic here, right? Let's just extrapolate what we know from the last 6 years of Rise of Kingdoms meta, right? Let's just take all the last 6 years. I've been playing since like a month after launch. Okay, my experience in Rise of Kingdoms is older than some of the people's children watching this video. Okay, so let's just use that knowledge for a moment and extrapolate out here. Okay, 2400 to 5 targets, it's smite damage, it's in a half circle as we can see from the animation here, and and there's a 30% chance that that's bumped up by 15%. Each target has that chance, right? So this is going to probably occur at least once, if not more than once, every skill cycle. So okay, his active skill is already super strong. Second skill, we have 20% infantry march speed. We also have 10% infantry health and 40% infantry attack. So once again, the same amount of health as William Wallace, but more attack. Lol. Okay, and for infantry, 20% march speed is really good. So okay, so we're getting 50% of stats and a really strong AoE in the active skill. Let's see if that sounds familiar, right? We have a really strong active skill, 50% of stats. I think it's safe to assume that we can expect solid performance out of Bai Chi at 5511, especially when you consider that the third skill is still going to give you 10 stacks of malice whenever you use an active skill, but the smite damage is going to be 100 instead of 300, and you gain a 2% bonus to save wounds inflicted and a 10% bonus to rage recovery speed. So the first part of the skill, right, this actually has nothing to do with the number of skill points, whether this is at 1, whether it's at 3, whether it's at 5, you're still going to gain 10 stacks of malice no matter what, right? It's just what's going to happen when you spend those stacks is a little bit worse, right? The fourth skill at 1 says you get 5% more normal damage. Okay, well that's 50% of the value right there just by unlocking it, and when attacking a field troop you still gain 10 stacks of malice upon entering combat. Okay, so that's unchanged. You gain 10 stacks of malice for every 10% units you lose. Okay, again also unchanged, and you get a 1% bonus to smite damage dealt up to 6% for every 10% units missing. So really, and we have to test this when he comes into the game, but the way that this is worded and the way that the community at large is interpreting this is that you're going to gain more smite damage bonus as you lose units, right? But to gain the maximum value out of this skill, you will have had to lose 60% of your army, right? You get 5% smite damage bonus for every 10% you're missing up to 30%. Okay, so 30 divided by 5 is 6. So if you lose 10% 6 times, that means you've lost 60% of your units. The value of this is actually, I mean, again, we have to test them in game, but like I've never really liked skills that give you bonuses as you lose troops, because as you lose troops, you become less and less effective on the field anyway. And this is kind of just a way to like sort of counterbalance that, I guess. But like, I don't know, I feel like at 5511 he's going to be a really solid commander. Now again, I could be wrong. He's not in the game, so we have to see some real world testing, but I do think that based off of everything we've ever learned about Rise of Kingdoms for 6 years straight, and based on other commanders who have similar circumstances with his kit in terms of a strong AoE, 50% stats, 20% march speed, I think it's safe to assume he'll be okay, at least okay at 5511. We can all agree on that, right? Like that's pretty logical to just arrive at the conclusion. We're all looking at the same numbers here, right? Okay, now if that's wrong, of course I'll make a video covering Bai Chi when he comes out. We'll talk about if he's actually lived up to the hype or not, but I think at 5511 we can assume that he's going to be a solid commander in Rise of Kingdoms. But now that I really think about it, King Arthur's probably the best 5511 commander in Rise of Kingdoms. Even when Bai Chi comes out, the value on this third skill even at 1 is just so good, and you still get half the value of the rage reduction. Like, ah man, and he gets more health here, right? Which is really good. So whew, man, King Arthur is an absolute beast. So guys, I think that's gonna do it. I think King Arthur takes the #1 spot. I think if I were a betting man, I would say Bai Chi takes the #2 spot. I think CPO Prime, Shajar, and Cordoba come in relatively in third there, and then we have Margaret, Ragnar, Herman Prime following that, and then we have the 2 honorable mentions that I mentioned at the beginning of the video in the form of Joan of Arc Prime at 5115 and the 5511 Mehmed that you're going to get for free just by playing the game eventually. Anyway guys, if you made it all the way to the end of the video, make sure you like the video, comment down below your thoughts, and subscribe. And with that being said guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Omniarch. I will talk to you guys again soon. Peace.